10 years ago, there was a cultural revolution. The return of a long-loved franchise, now in the hands of a new company, whose acquisition brought disturbance to nerds across the galaxy. 10 years ago was the release of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Okay, enough of that. I'll be honest, I haven't been excited about, well, anything Star Wars related in quite some time. I still need to play Jedi Survivor, watch Andor, and read those Old Republic books I bought like 5 years ago. In 2025, we're feasting with Star Wars stories, but The Force Awakens released before all of this. In 2015, Star Wars was beloved, like always, but not at the level it is now. The last live-action movie had been 10 years prior, and though the Clone Wars was going strong after its first end in 2014, it didn't have nearly the same kind of fan base then that it does now, especially after the movie that was released to kickstart it flopped critically and financially. In the 2010s, it was Star Trek filling the darkness of classic sci-fi adventures, and Disney began to see some turnaround with its Marvel money after purchasing the comic company, and the Empire of the Mouse was rising with a new purchase, Lucasfilms, George Lucas's production company, which included Indiana Jones and, of course, Star Wars. So, what was this movie going to be about, or rather this trilogy? There were hundreds of books at this point that told several tales of an older Luke, Leia, and Han, and even brought about the creation of now fan-favorite villain, General Thrawn. How would these sequel movies go about adapting these books? Here's the neat part. They didn't. In a move that shocked and infuriated many, Disney announced that, oh, by the way, if it didn't happen on a movie screen, it's no longer canon. See you real soon! Now, decades of award-winning books and beloved video games were all rendered useless in the eyes of Disney, as they were overwhelmed by the number of stories they had, instead of taking their time to plot out how to combine elements from each of these. After all, these guys had now been doing this with the MCU, whose job it was to modernize decades of stories into an enjoyable piece of pop art. So, what was their play? I'm not wearing this the whole time. This is actually quite uncomfortable. I don't know how I managed to do this for whole days at a Comic-Con, but it is not comfortable to sit in this thing. I will tell you that right now. Okay. Whew. Yeah, much better. This is a real shirt. What was I saying? Oh, right. What was their play? Get the guy who did those Star Trek movies. That's right, every sci-fi nerd's favorite movie director. No problems there with J.J. Abrams. Now, on paper, that's really not a bad idea. Star Wars and Star Trek are vastly different properties, despite constantly getting mixed up due to their names. But on the basis of a guy who could make these older science fiction movies cool and into modern blockbusters, not the worst decision. Unless you were a Star Trek fan, of course. This is all preamble to say, despite these questionable decisions and decreasing excitement for the franchise now, after watching episode 7 10 years later, I still love this movie. Yeah, get your pitchforks ready, jump to the comments, but I will acknowledge that this movie isn't perfect, especially with the knowledge we have now that the trilogy, if you can call it that, has finished. But before we get there, hear me out and let me say what works for me about this movie on its own, and why it made me fall in love with Star Wars again. For starters, I actually enjoy the way this movie parallels its predecessors, to an extent. In a similar vein to A New Hope, the movie jumps right into the action. The Empire has fallen, but another dark force has arisen, the First Order. With Jedi Master Luke Skywalker gone rogue, the Resistance is on the hunt for any piece of information leading to him, specifically the last section of a map leading to his location, which is hidden in a droid. Once they find this old guy, they can defeat the bad guy. Sound familiar? However, what's done differently here is that the first encounter isn't done on the spaceship of the villains, it's done on this scarce desert planet, Jakku. Totally different from Tatooine. It's can't even distinguish them. Wait. Here is where Resistance pilot Poe Dameron is meeting with an ally that holds the droid who holds the piece of the map to Luke's location. Unlike A New Hope, we aren't given the space stuff first and then flown down to Tatooine. It all starts right here on Jakku. Kylo Ren and the First Order meet the heroes on their turf. It's similar for sure, but twisted in a way that makes it feel like the stakes are a bit raised, and that the Resistance really is the ones being hunted in this galactic game of cat and mouse. And I don't care who you are, Kylo Ren stopping that blast mid-air with his hand is one of the coolest things done with the Force. And his theme, bro, do not get me started. For over 40 years, John Williams has absolutely cooked with Star Wars themes, and his work for the sequel trilogy is no exception. Plus, we immediately also get the introduction of Finn, who quickly became my favorite character. I mean, come on, a stormtrooper who instantly saw the errors of the Empire? First Order? Same thing. The bloody hand on his helmet is still the coldest shot of the entire trilogy, while also being the perfect visual representation of how Finn views all of this. This character arc setup is just so fascinating and interesting and fresh, and I can't wait to see the satisfying way that it'll play off in future installments. Finally, we meet our last and arguably main protagonist, Rey. Even lower than Luke Skywalker was as a humble farmer, she's a literal scavenger. No, seriously, that's her job. She finds cool stuff in the desert and old machines, including, holy crap, is that an ATST? And gives these cool things she finds back to Simon Pegg in a big alien suit. And he says, 1/4 portion. That just always made me chuckle. I think of this movie and I think of him saying that. What a delivery. Her intro is pretty straightforward, but also intriguing. She can clearly take care of herself, so why is she stuck on this desolate planet? That gets explained by BB-8, this trilogy's obligatory little droid. I cannot overstate how obsessed I was with BB-8 after this movie came out. I had headphones of BB-8. I got an ornament of BB-8 the next Christmas. I even spent an absurd amount of money on a phone-controlled robot BB-8 when I was on Hawaii on a choir trip, and yeah, I really like BB-8. Listen, if the thumbs up letter gag doesn't make you crack a smile, I'm convinced you don't have a pulse. The movie setup for all our protagonists are great, but the villain of it all is just as intriguing. The middle of this movie gives us a lot more info on Kylo Ren, the most dramatic Disney princess by far, as he has a lot of what the kids call now a crash out. I actually love these moments personally because they not only intentionally bring a bit of levity by saying to the audience, hey, this guy isn't all there. He isn't Darth Vader as much as he wants to be like him. They also showcase that he's this person who's torn between something, caught in the middle of his own destiny, dare I say, trapped between the two sides of the Force. This is something that was solidified for me on a rewatch. Much like the Phantom Menace in the title of Episode 1 isn't about Darth Maul, but rather Darth Sidious, The Force Awakens isn't really about one particular person. It's mostly about Rey, sure, but it's also kind of about Kylo Ren, as he's clearly driven by something. Or, with the introduction of Snoke, someone with far beyond average understanding of the Force. What is clear, though, is that now the inhabitants of this galaxy are much more aware of the Force as a living, breathing thing. This does disregard the concept of midichlorians established in the prequel trilogy, which I never really clicked with anyways. I personally like the idea that the Force isn't so much a thing that only those worthy can yield, as it clearly can be used for evil, but rather it's a sort of spirit that lives in almost every living thing. Is this ambitious? Sure. But I also think it's a unique approach to a long discussed but never fully fleshed out concept that, honestly, could be the main character of this movie. We're shown so many new things just in this film that can be done with the Force, and this is exemplified best through two characters who, despite never being shown to have the capability of using the Force, have that otherworldly understanding of it, between Maz Kanata and Han Solo. Maz Kanata is a really cool character I wish we could have seen more of, as she's sort of like the Yoda of this movie. You know, if Yoda did have a role back in A New Hope, she and Han discuss how much the universe has changed since the fall of the Empire. But there's an underlying sense of dread that, with Luke missing, there's no one left to defend it. Then we have one of my favorite scenes in the movie where Rey feels something pulling towards her in this little box at the cellar of the tavern they meet Maz at. She feels something strong, something calling to her. And when she opens it, she looks in and sees none other than the lightsaber of Luke Skywalker. She sees visions of the past, present, and what we learn to be near future. And Disney subtitles did confirm that the voice calling out to Rey right before Maz snaps her back to reality is in fact the voice of Obi-Wan. Wait, how did Maz get her hands on Luke's lightsaber? Like, I feel like that's a really important thing to just have lying around. Also, how does Obi-Wan know who Rey is? I mean, like, it's a cool surprise. He's my favorite character, but it's just like, how does he know? Is there something with the Force? Is he related to Rey? I don't know, but I'm sure that this movie or the next will give us a very in-depth explanation of this. Maz tells Rey just whose lightsaber that is, and the weight of her being able to pick it up. And now that it, and of course the Force, now calls to you. It's on the nose, but this does kind of show how these legacy sequels can really work. Especially one like this, where it's built almost as a giant reminder of what makes watching Star Wars movies fun. These big action sequences with modern special effects that won't age within a decade, the music that plays right as a hero picks up a lightsaber for the very first time, down to the basically beat for beat reconstruction of the third act. I mean, I think Abrams and crew were running on a deadline with the script, and Disney was like, hey, chop chop, buckos, we gotta wrap this up before the release of Planes. Do you guys remember Planes? Yeah, I never watched it either. Anyways, the writers just looked at the spare copy of episode 4 and they were like, this is it. This is how we'll end this movie. Don't get me wrong. A New Hope has a fantastic third act. It's up there with the most recognizable movie endings. Like, seriously, how many parodies of shows and in movies have you watched that directly reference the TIE Fighter sequence? And it should be noted that the first part of every Star Wars trilogy kind of has the same third act. Plan of action is formed for blowing up this big warship in space, and a lightsaber duel where the mentor gets killed in front of the student. It really works well for this movie, and to quote Mr. Lucas himself, it's like poetry. It rhymes. But it's the way that The Force Awakens shamelessly copies that formula that does drag it down a bit for me, especially on a rewatch. The movie switches from Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV like, oh, hey, to Marty McFly saying, oh, hey, wait, I've seen this one before. You know, like they're two different kinds of contexts. They're two different kinds of recognizations. Between blowing up the Death Star 2.0, Star Killer base, and getting to the mentor gets killed violently in front of me thing, it's all too familiar. Except the way Episode 7 has more emotional weights to that mentor death. Of course, with the prequel trilogy, Clone Wars, and Obi-Wan series, Old Man Ben's death in A New Hope now has that extra amount of weight, as we've seen through his eyes just what this world has gone through, what the Force has called him to do. But in just this movie, it already establishes the connection between a new character, Kylo Ren, and a returning one, Han Solo, with an estranged bond. Here we have a father facing his son, but also two men on completely opposite sides of the Force. And this is where we get to Han's view on the Force and how it works within the universe. In Leia's return scene, Han and Leia have very different feelings on the current state of Ben. Han says he believes that their son, as he refers to him as, has been lost to the darkness, that he is beyond hope. But not Leia. She still believes in the good in Ben, even calling him that by name, even now. This demonstrates the proper Force awareness that Leia has now, on top of showing growth from the last trilogy, especially the last time we've seen her in regards to the Force, as in the original trilogy, she wasn't nearly as upset about the death of Darth Vader as Luke was, partially because she didn't see the full spectrum of it. Here, like Han, she's grown, and once Han is killed, her reaction is identical to that of Yoda and Obi-Wan when they react to the fallout of Order 66 in Episode 3. This intense pain that clutches at you. This brings us back to Han and his new Force sensitivity. It's risen like crazy from being practically non-existent to now, where it's his speech in the beginning of the movie about believing in the Force, where we hear the Force theme for the first time. This motif would only play once more at the end of the movie. Han Solo doesn't just believe in the Force now, he's incredibly in tune with it. Even to the point of death, Han Solo is driven by what he knows, which only makes his death that much more impactful. Obviously, this is a heartbreaking scenario to be in. But not only do you feel the heartbreak Han feels, but you also see the understanding. At the fateful duel on the bridge, Kylo asks, "I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it." He sounds unsure, but more afraid than uncertain. He feels the pull of the dark side, and that, more importantly, it's not something he'll be able to overcome. The asking, "Will you help me?" is what I believe to be the last part of Ben Skywalker, not Kylo Ren. When Han tells him yes, it's both as his father and a man who understands each of their destinies, each of their roles in the Force. His death still surprises him, but at the same time, his final act is putting his hand on the face of his son, showing that, despite what he's seen, a part of Han still knows his boy is in there. Finally, we have the climactic duel, which serves as the end of the movie, and has a very unique approach despite these familiar tropes followed. See, neither Finn nor Rey are experienced with the lightsaber, but they are also facing off a now mortally wounded Kylo Ren, thanks to Chewbacca. Finn tries his best to fight him off, but gets absolutely rocked, and when Kylo Ren reaches over for Luke's lightsaber, it wavers, and it flies right past his hands into Rey's. The Force theme only plays once again now, as it's come full circle. Rey, like Han, now has full hope in the Force, and understands that she too has a part to play in all of this. That scene will never not give me chills. Like, just thinking about it, I'm like, ooh! I remember watching that scene for the first time on the big screen, mouth agape, and thinking to myself, oh right, I fucking love Star Wars. Something we've been seeing throughout the movie is Rey using the Force, and getting more comfortable with it, albeit maybe a bit too much. Like, we only see her pick up the lightsaber, and then the interrogation scene where she orders that stormtrooper to free her. Objectively, we're not shown as much as we could on how she knows just what to do with the Force. Like, there's not really an actual training sequence in this movie, but she has a clear understanding of it, like this natural talent. But I can excuse it, as it's clearly been hinted at that she has deeper ties to a Jedi. We just don't know who yet. Or, on the other hand, maybe like Anakin, the Force has chosen her specifically to serve a higher purpose. Whatever the case is, I'm sure it will make sense, and the following movies will never backtrack on whatever backstory they decide to do. Like, give us a clear answer. Listen, on its own, The Force Awakens is a really fun movie, and a reminder of what makes Star Wars just so cool in the first place. I would still say that it succeeds in being a great part one, a great opening to a new trilogy, bringing in familiar faces while introducing these interesting new ones. And yet, a rewatch after all these years feels almost bittersweet, as we know how Disney failed to deliver on some pretty big promises. As much as I think he's a great director in his own right, I'm still not entirely sure of what Rian Johnson was going for with The Last Jedi. Abrams is teeing up these perfect sequel surprises between Snoke, Rey's true identity, Luke's reaction to seeing his old lightsaber, Finn recovering, being a great hero after this character arc he went through. Like, the list goes on. And then for Disney to just sort of course correct with The Rise of Skywalker, like, is Rey related to this strong Force user? Well, yes, but actually no. And all the Jedi from the past can communicate with her through her mind because of reasons. I still don't know why Abrams didn't just do the whole trilogy, as Episode 9 feels more like a sequel to this movie than Episode 8 does. He says he regrets not doing it. I think everyone else does too. But this is Disney we're talking about. People, the same company that is paying Robert Downey Jr. $100 million to return for 2 more Avengers movies. Surely Disney could have threw enough cheese at J.J. Abrams to get him to stay. There's so many conflicts that are improperly resolved, so much wasted potential in the following 2 movies. Finn never becomes a Jedi, despite that being set up so easily from Episode 7, with Episode 9 outwardly teasing the idea of this throughout. Plus, isn't the whole subplot in The Last Jedi about Luke teaching the next generation of Jedi? Are they really not going to learn any lessons from losing him, being the sole hero, and just say, well, we got Rey now. That's all we need. Don't need any other Jedi now. No, sir. Just one. And Poe. Poe Dameron, his first friend, Finn's first friend, like the charming character the Han Solo set up to be in Episode 7. Why does he have, nothing to do in the last 2 movies? Like, he's easily one of the best parts of this one, and yet gets zip in the second movies. Like, you can't make a guy this cool and then barely use him. Yeah, you got me there. And I like what was done with the characters of the original trilogy here, but it's still such a wasted opportunity for never having to see Luke, Leia, and Han get back together in this one. Like, honestly, not even a poorly deep-faked version of the trio in a flashback sequence, post-Return of the Jedi. If you're going to have Uncanny Valley Mark Hamill appear in multiple seasons of The Mandalorian and off-kilter Carrie Fisher for Rogue One and Rise of Skywalker, surely there could have been a way to get the original gang back together again. And maybe even have Luke play the role of Obi-Wan in this first movie, but he gets iced at the end of this one. But I digress. It's been 10 years, and as a standalone movie, yes, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is still a very fun, emotional, and exciting piece of blockbuster history that I was so glad I got to see in theaters multiple times. It's just basically everything after that was, well, not good. For a brief moment, though, the magic was back. And you know what? I gotta give them credit for that. Despite what was yet to come, I'll always think of The Force Awakens fondly, as it reignited my love for a monumental franchise that holds memories with friends, family, and does a great job of telling the unending conquest of good over evil. The fan base still sucks, though.